Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Diana Gregg, and today I wanted to share with you an experience I had in 1997, an extremely close brush with death, and why I am no longer an atheist. This event radically changed my life forever. It created a major paradigm shift for me. It exposed my atheistic beliefs to be no more than very naive, very ignorant thinking. This experience blew a hole open in my awareness and expanded my views on reality. It opened up to me a new understanding of the concept of God and there truly being a purpose for our lives. There was absolutely no going back to my previous concept of reality after this. I was dying. Paralysis had set in, I was alone, helpless, and I was unable to call out for help. Yet, some invisible benevolent force or forces interacted with me and even intervened and saved my life. This is a true account of what happened to me when I was 20 years old, living in Rochester, England. I was writing my dissertation for college, which was due to be handed in just a few days. A friend of mine offered me the use of their guest room to get away from the noise and the commotion of the student dorm I was living in. It was a small room with a bed and a desk only large enough to hold an electric typewriter. The room was located upstairs on the furthest end of the property you could get, and the rest of the house's bedrooms and living space were built into a separate wing. So I was situated in a wonderfully isolated and quiet location, free from passerbys or any disturbances. I happen to be one of those people who have tremendous stamina. I can stay up all night or several days in a row if I have to, in order to complete important projects. And on that very night, I had intended on buckling down like a workhorse to get as much done as I possibly could without any interferences. My friend was also letting me make use of their electronic typewriter, which was a pretty fancy thing to use back then in 1997, before I owned my first computer. This typewriter had a very small digital display, maybe 2.5 inches in length. It was so small that you couldn't see your entire sentence that you were typing without scrolling through your text. Like I said, it was 1997, and back then it was a real treat to use. In fact, I was very thrilled to be using this until a few hours into the night, the display window started showing me garbled up text. And I had to go through and I had to delete several sentences and retype them correctly. However, to my confusion, the text would continue to come out all jumbled up and garbled, making no sense whatsoever. So I decided that I needed to check each key individually to see if each one was typing the letter correctly. So I went through the keys, pushing them one at a time. I was pushing Q, it was typing Q, W, E, etc. And sure enough, each of the keys were typing correctly. And this was really baffling to me, and I couldn't understand why my sentences were getting garbled up. However, the next thing that happened was even more perplexing. I started to hear something that sounded far away at first. It was as if something was speaking to me in a stern and urgent tone, only I wasn't hearing it with my ears. Instead, it was a completely internal dialogue. I was hearing this annoying, "Get up, get up," repeated over and over again. In my stupor and out of utter irritation, I basically told it to back off and leave me alone. I was confused as to why I was asleep. With such an important paper due, it wasn't like me to sleep during a time when I was meant to be powering through, but I was feeling extremely exhausted and I was unable to fully wake myself up. And so I put my case forward that, hey, I'm a hard worker, I'm diligent, I've always had the willpower and stamina to pull myself together and push through pain or fatigue or whatever to accomplish any task I needed to. I just needed a little bit more time to rest, and then I'd get back to work. But this nuisance, it wouldn't leave me alone. Instead, it became even more persistent and urgent, crying out for me to wake up. So finally, I asked, why? What's the problem? And the voice replied to me in a very serious tone, "You are dying." I scoffed. What an absurd thing to say. Who ever heard of someone dying from a power nap? Now, I know I was behaving like a defiant teenager. I was ready to disregard the nonsense and just let myself sleep. I wanted the rude, badgering voice to go away, but it persisted. "Wake up. Wake up. You must get up now or else you will die." Now, die? That statement was alarming, and it sounded so extreme and just too laughable to me. How? I challenged in disbelief. But I was starting to take the message a little bit more seriously, and the voice said, "Your brain is being poisoned." Poisoned? By what? I asked. The voice replied, "The heater is poisoning you. First will come brain damage, then your death." Now, that was enough to scare the bleep out of me. And that is when I realized I was face down on my keyboard. I couldn't recall any decision on my part to take a nap. I was feeling extremely dizzy, exhausted, and disoriented. I didn't understand what had happened to me. Why was my face down on the keyboard? I would have never chosen to rest my head, my face, on the keyboard. I must have passed out or something. Once again, I felt like I was slipping away, losing consciousness. I just wanted to close my eyes and just let go. But instead I heard, "Get up! Get up!" In that moment, I tried to sit up, but nothing happened. The carbon monoxide poisoning had been going on for a while, and so my body had already developed motor paralysis. My body would not respond to my brain's commands. My face was pressed down against the keyboard while my arms were just dangling at my sides. I tried screaming out for help, but my body did nothing, as if it was completely detached from me, and I began to panic. Nothing I tried worked. I was screaming and crying on the inside, but no noise would even leave my lips. No tears would flow down my cheeks. My physical body was completely non-responsive, and I was terrified. I thought I was going to lay there helpless and die. No one would find me until the morning, until it was too late. Inside my mind, I said, "I am completely paralyzed. I can't move." And in desperation, I pleaded, "Please. Please help me. I can't move. No one will check on me until morning. I'll die if you don't help me." And then suddenly I felt this tremendous jolt of electricity coursing through my body. My body was starting to have a seizure, and the violent jerking motion made my body involuntarily flail, causing me to fall out of my chair. The fall caused an impact to my lower back, but that caused a brief but helpful rush of adrenaline. The adrenaline rush caused an energy burst in me that was just enough to get myself propped up against the wall in a seated position. However, very rapidly, I began to lose control over my motor skills again. My head slumped, and then the voice instructed me to get to the heater. I thought, "Oh God, what is heater? I think I should know this word, but I can't remember what it is. Please help me. I don't remember what heater is. I don't even know what it looks like." The voice said to me, "Your eyes still work. Scan the room with your eyes from left to right. Allow your eyes to glance at each thing in the room. When your eyes touch heater, I will confirm that is heater." So I did exactly that. Each time my eyes touched an object, I desperately struggled trying to remember what that object was called and was that the heater I was supposed to get to. I remember looking at the bed and frantically searching through my mind to remember what it was called. And once I realized that that was bed and not heater, I quickly moved on to the next object in the room. I did this until finally my eyes looked upon heater, and I felt this huge confirmation in my being. "There, that's heater. Go to the heater," the voice directed me. Only my body would not move, no matter how hard I commanded it to. I said, "Please, I need your help." I was begging at this point, knowing that as I lay there paralyzed, struggling to stay conscious, that death was inevitable. I was trying everything I could to move, but nothing was happening. I said, "Please, I need your help or I will not survive this." The voice then instructed me to crawl, to go through the motions of crawling inside my mind. So I thought about what it was like to crawl when suddenly my limbs began clumsily moving in very small increments. And to my astonishment, my body began to inch towards the heater. My movements across the floor were completely disproportionate to the strength and effort I was able to muster. But I knew that it was important for me to initiate, at least in my mind, the very act of crawling in order to keep getting this assistance. It was clear to me that this invisible force was moving my body for me. I felt my arms being moved. I felt my body being moved across the carpet. I was feeling like a fish out of water. I didn't have the strength or the coordination to use my hands and to crawl. I didn't have the ability to move my fingers or my wrists or to bend my arms at the elbow. I didn't have any ability to move, yet there I was being moved across the floor. As soon as I got to the heater, I tried in vain to remember how was I to shut it off. I had been the one to turn this heater on and off, but there I was, unable to remember how. There was a dial right there on top of the unit, but I couldn't comprehend anymore how to work it in order to shut it off. There were letters printed on the dial, but I could no longer read or understand what each of those letters meant. The voice told me to reach behind the back of the heater. I tried my best to fumble my hands around the back. My fingers and wrists were completely limp, and I knew that even if I figured out what to do, my hands were utterly incapable of controlled movements. As I fumbled my hands over the propane tank, not remembering what I was meant to do to turn it off, my hands, wrists, and fingers were limp, and I had no control over them. Suddenly, I felt this pulling at my wrist as my hand was immediately guided to a valve on the propane tank. And as I fumbled with the valve, I felt it move into the closed position, and I saw the heater shut off. My body slumped to the ground, and I laid there, once again, unable to move. But this time, I didn't care. I was feeling so relieved, and I was so ready to let go of everything. I felt myself slipping away, losing consciousness, and I was so ready to enter that deep, deep sleep when it happened again. The urgency screaming out at me, and I wanted to scream back at it, "Shush! I did what I was supposed to. Now just let me sleep." But the voice said to me, "You mustn't sleep. You are not safe yet. You are dying. You must get to the door." The door to the room was shut, so the room was heavily concentrated with carbon monoxide. I had turned off the source, the heater, but it wasn't safe for me to stay in the room. I had to use everything left in me to get to the door. But when I tried to lift my head, no movement. I started to cry out inside my head, "No, no, 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 this can't happen. I can't die like this. I cannot move. You must help me. Please help me." I did as I had been instructed earlier and began imagining using my arms to pull myself across the floor. Suddenly, I felt it. The carpet underneath me began to move again. I opened my eyes and saw that I was indeed moving. I kept trying to move my arms, and as I did, my body would move a few more inches. I was so exhausted, but I knew that I couldn't afford to give up. Finally, I was there, laying flat on my stomach, and the doorknob was just much too high for me to reach, and I no longer had any strength in me to push myself up. I thought to myself, would this be the end for me? All these things were going through my mind, things that I took for granted every single day. I was healthy and strong just a few hours ago when I walked into this room, and now something as simple as being able to turn a doorknob would determine whether I lived or died. I was laying there on the floor helpless, and with the realization that I was in the process of dying. The doorknob was too far away. I barely had any energy for movement left in me. If I try to reach now and fail in that effort, I'll probably burn through everything I've got left, and in the morning, they're going to find me dead. The voice spoke to me again and said, "Press your mouth and nose under the gap of the door. Breathe in oxygen from the other side. It will give you the energy necessary to reach the doorknob. On the count of 3, give it everything you've got and lunge for that doorknob." "What if I miss?" I asked. The voice said, "You won't miss." And I thought, oh God, I hope you're right. I did as I was instructed, and I breathed in the cold air that was on the other side of the door. It was so refreshing and energizing. I took a few deep breaths in and out until they instructed me to get ready for the count. 1, 2, 3, lunge. I lunged with everything I had, and my hand grabbed the knob like it was a baseball I was catching in my mitt. I squeezed it tight before my arm went dead, and I collapsed on the floor. The door came open. The voice said, "Now quick, pull yourself as far as you can out of the room." I tried pulling, and then everything went all black. I completely lost consciousness. Around 8 a.m. the next morning, I felt someone shaking me awake. It was like I was in a deep, narrow, and blurry tunnel. I could barely see or hear anything. My ears and head felt stuffed with cotton, and I had a splitting headache. I heard a muffled voice asking me what I was doing on the floor as they attempted to help me up. I couldn't speak, and I had trouble becoming fully awake, but I was alive. This near-fatal incident prompted my friend to look into that heater, and what he discovered was horrifying. That exact model of heater had already been responsible for multiple deaths in Spain. After this incident, I looked into carbon monoxide poisoning to understand the mechanics of it. What I discovered was carbon monoxide poisoning can cause significant brain injury, with the heart and the brain being the organs most susceptible to the poisoning. Now, people tend to believe that once a person is away from the source of the poisoning, that they are no longer in any danger. However, the mechanisms of poisoning are more complicated than that. Besides the injuries that the carbon monoxide poisoning can cause at the time of the incident, there is also what is known as reperfusion oxygen injury. Now, this is where further damage is caused to the tissues that were previously starved of oxygen once the oxygen returns. Some symptoms of carbon monoxide don't occur until weeks after the initial poisoning happened. Delayed neurological sequelae, or DNS, are neurological symptoms that show up later on, and unfortunately for many people, the damage will be permanent. A significant number of people who have survived carbon monoxide poisoning end up suffering from long-term neurological, cognitive, and even cardiovascular issues. Other symptoms might include, but are not limited to, memory loss, personality changes, movement problems, problems with vision, brain damage that doesn't heal, damage to the heart, possibly leading to life-threatening heart problems. I once met a doctor who suffered from carbon monoxide poisoning who is now dependent on the use of an oxygen tank. She told me this was due to permanent mitochondrial damage that the carbon monoxide poisoning had caused her. In a 7-year study performed in southern Spain, 415 fatal cases of carbon monoxide poisoning were reviewed. In 81% of those cases, carboxyhemoglobin levels were measured. Only 33% of those fatalities had carboxyhemoglobin levels above 50%, while 48% of those fatalities had levels below 50%. Going off the symptoms I experienced, confusion, severe motor paralysis, and loss of consciousness, this is all indicative of having carboxyhemoglobin levels of 51% or greater. Carbon monoxide poisoning is accumulative, which means as you breathe it, it continues to build up in your bloodstream, becoming more deadly. I had already reached 51% or greater carboxyhemoglobin level when I was unconscious at my desk. Therefore, I was already above levels that have been proven to be fatal when I heard the voice screaming at me to wake up. This means that without that miraculous intervention, I wouldn't even be alive today to talk about it. And remarkably, I don't have any long-term side effects that I'm aware of. The purpose for making this video is to share with you a personal experience that proved to me beyond any shadow of a doubt that there is more to life than what we can see. I am not here to tell you what that was that assisted me and essentially saved me from certain death. I will leave it with you to contemplate and come up with your own theories and conclusions for yourself. Since then, I have experienced many, many more extraordinary events that completely defy what our outdated mainstream science, with its limited perceptions, accepts as possible. My goal here is to share personal experiences with you as someone who is a lover of science and logic, but also as someone who has experienced extraordinary events not yet well understood by mainstream science. If you've enjoyed watching, please give me a like and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more. Thank you for watching.